Hello and welcome to Faith Matters. This is the show where we take a spiritual perspective on life across Merseyside and indeed beyond. And this is a special episode in the wake of the Paris attacks and atrocities. In the studio today we have Adam Kelwick from Al Raqaba Mosque in Toxteth and Malcolm Kennedy, long-standing city councillor here in Liverpool. Welcome. Adam, you're back again. You were on a few months ago for Ramadan. Can I begin by asking you, we're not going to rehearse what happened last Friday in Paris, because there's no point, because we all know. But what were your immediate reactions and what are your reflections now?
I think, in all honesty, as the news was breaking, I think so were many people's hearts. As far as elements of the Muslim community, whether they're leaders, whether they're general worshippers in the mosque, everybody who I know is absolutely devastated. Our thoughts and our prayers are with the people who've lost their loved ones in France. And let's not forget, several of those were Muslims also. Our thoughts and our prayers are also with the ones who survived the attacks. And from amongst them were, once again, Muslims. One example was somebody who held back a suicide bomber from entering into the football stadium. He was a Muslim, and we have to recognise. And the reason I'm mentioning that there were Muslims amongst them is not to reinforce this us and them. It's just to remind people that we're all humans. And when attacks like these happen, whether they're in the east or in the west, they're against innocent people, and there's no differentiation. People are not able to discriminate between who they're killing when they decide to kill innocent people, and so we're all at risk to be exposed to that. It could have been my children, it could have been my family, it could have been my friends, whether I'm talking about my Christian family or my Muslim family. It could have been anybody.
Yep. Malcolm, how did you respond?
I was shocked, absolutely horrified. I had a sense that the world was changing, and not in a way that I would want the world to change. I admit I shed some tears. I think it's utterly tragic, and well, is it also avoidable? I don't know if it's all avoidable, but things happen in the world and you feel totally helpless, and you just can't control things. I think Adam's absolutely right. I think that people of all faiths, different nationalities, suffered in that attack. I think it was unconscionable what was done. And I still feel very, very strongly about that whenever I think about it.
Okay, the question for me is this a religious problem or challenge that we have? Not just what happened in Paris, but the backstory to it. It goes back over decades now. Is this a religious problem we have to solve, challenge that we have to overcome, or is it a political issue, or is it both? And if so, how does that work? Malcolm.
It's a very difficult question, isn't it? I don't think it's certainly not purely a religious question. I think neither is it purely a political question, because religion comes into play here. But very often, I can remember playing Dylan's God on My Side to my auntie recently, because my auntie passed away, and I remember it was one of my memories of her. And a lot of people claim to have God on their side when they commit horrible actions. And I don't think human beings can do that. I think it's vanity. I think it's taking the name of the Lord, thy God, in vain. But so I think primarily it's a political one, which is using religion for its cover. I think the strength of religions have been certainly in my knowledge of the Christian faith, about how you change yourself, how you react internally, what your relationship is, with the Creator. And I know in my reading of the word jihad, for instance, it always was meant to refer to an internal struggle, which is very similar to the Christian ideal of the search for perfection with God's help. So, and I think the perversion of that, which started largely in the 70s with the book The Neglected Struggle, and the West's reaction and incompetence at times in reacting to that, has led to a distortion of religion and the tragedy we get today.
Adam, if you want to add anything to that at all, or I was thinking actually as you were speaking, the word Israel, just to bring, we haven't got a Jewish representative here, but we could easily have, that the word Israel actually means in Hebrew struggle, the people of the struggle. So, we've all in our faith traditions have this notion of the internal struggle. Adam, you want to add anything to that?
I think asking this question, is it religious, is it political? I think the Middle East is a very good example, because what many people do today is see these wars, see these conflicts, see this chaos between humans, and they see the common denominator as being religion, and they see the reason for these conflicts as being solely religion. And for that reason, you'll go to a place like Jerusalem, which people, they say it's the Holy Land. So why is it that the Holy Land has so many problems and killing and murders and disputes, and nobody seems to get on? Now, what I would say is actually, if the people there were to go back to their religions and to go back to their scriptures, they will all find that all of their religions teach that it's forbidden to kill innocent people. So I would say that the solution is in the religion. But if we're being honest, if we're asking, is it religious, is it political, I think it's a human problem. I think it's a problem with humans in general. I think there is an element of politics, there is an element of religion, and also we as a Muslim community, we need to recognize this, and we need to be honest, and we need to say that there are people doing things in the name of our faith, and unfortunately their voices, even though their numbers are much, much smaller than the rest of us, their voices are very attractive to the mainstream media. And, many people are coming out and openly criticizing the Muslim community, saying, why aren't you speaking out about the likes of ISIS? And my response to that is, we are, but nobody wants to listen because they're so busy shouting about how nobody's speaking out about ISIS. And what I would like to challenge is somebody to give me the name of one mosque in this country or one Muslim association who hasn't publicly distanced themselves or spoken out against ISIS and their likes. And I'd be very surprised to hear of a single mosque in this country who hasn't distanced themselves from such people. And if they haven't, then I think that's a problem which needs to be addressed, and the Muslim community will be the best positioned people to be able to address such an issue.
You're saying it's just not being picked up by the media, they just don't want to report it, really?
Yeah, maybe my Facebook feed is different to everybody else's, because I've got lots of Muslim leaders on my Facebook, I've got lots of my Muslim friends, members of organisations, and everybody is unequivocally speaking out against the attacks in Paris and against the likes of ISIS. There have been books published on why the arguments which ISIS make to represent Islam are false according to the Islamic traditions. There are even political leaders like the leadership in Turkey who've come out, and their Grand Mufti, who is religious but attached to the political circles there, has come out and given reasons why their claim to a caliphate is illegitimate. And this has been going on for years. It's nothing new. But as I said, I don't think stories like that, unfortunately, in the times what we're in, sell newspapers or get the internet clicks or the internet interaction, and for that reason nobody seems to want to pick them up. And it's a shame, because what we have as a Muslim community here in the West is, after the attacks on Paris, which we were just as likely to be killed as anybody else in France, we also have the aftermath, the so-called revenge attacks, which we have to be on standby for. And there have been some serious incidents over the last few days, and people...
Yeah. You've got them there.
This is the thing, many people will come to us and they'll say, why aren't you speaking out about France?
You've only got about a minute to
problem.
tell us those before we come to the break.
It really is serious. This is just over the last couple of days. If we go to France, there was a solidarity march between all people from all backgrounds, and that was interrupted by a right-wing fascist group who were talking about expelling Islam. That's one example in Lille, in the south of France. You've got a mayor of a small town, once again in southern France, who's saying that Islam needs to be banned. I don't know how he plans to ban a religion, whether that's through genocide, whether that's through throwing people out of the country, whether that's through inquisition and forcing them to believe something they do. I don't know how he plans to do it, but he said that Islam as a faith needs to be banned. You've got other examples in Narbonne in France. You've got a mosque in Western France which was burned down. Even here, closer to home, there was a mosque and a centre which was firebombed just outside Glasgow.
Yep,
This is last night, 2 o'clock this morning. A mosque and a Muslim centre was firebombed, and it's been burnt. It's been burnt down to the ground now. You've had a 50-year-old couple who were running a fast food takeaway, beaten up by a gang of 15 people, and they specifically said, this is revenge for France. So my point is, not only are we equally as likely to suffer being on the receiving end of any terrorist attack, but we also have to deal with this afterwards. And this is not including the many examples of people being abused in the street, on the trains, and so forth.
Adam, thank you for that. And it's important that we're kept up to date, because the media, I didn't know, I knew of only one or two of those. But so join us after the break. When we come back, we're just going to unpack this whole issue further. Join us after the break for Faith Matters. Welcome back to Faith Matters and to our special edition where we're looking at the aftermath of the Paris attacks on Friday evening. In the studio, we have City Councillor Malcolm Kennedy, and from Al Rahma Mosque, Adam Kelwick. Welcome back. Malcolm, you wanted just to respond to what Adam was saying before the break. What would you like to say?
I think what I'd like to say is to reiterate what Adam said about our religions condemning the killing of innocent people, and of course it's not just killing; it's taking physical violence, criminal action against any innocent people for any reason, and in the case of the ones that have been highlighted by Adam, I mean, I have no problem not only distancing myself from those, but condemning those. And the greatest fear in the current situation is how people will react to what's happened, and react in a totally unacceptable manner. This is just not... the Christian is called upon to love his or her neighbour, and the question was asked, and who is my neighbour? And the neighbour wasn't the person who lived next door to you. The person who turned out to be the neighbour was the person who was travelling from another country.
The person with another religion,
yes,
as well. Of course, the Samaritans had a slightly different religion to the Jews at that time.
So the reaction should be one of concern and love for one's fellow Muslim citizen, and not one of hatred, because that is not an acceptable or anywhere. Steve Earle, I'm a big fan of Steve Earle, and he wrote, I don't remember learning how to hate in Sunday school.
Jerusalem. Yeah, I'm a fan of Steve Earle as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I never learned how to hate in Sunday school either.
And this is something which all our faith traditions share. Not only is it forbidden in our faith traditions to kill or oppress, but it's also illegal in the laws of every country in the world. And so what we need to do is break things down and simplify things a bit. You've heard the saying, the devil is in the detail. Yeah. I worry that when you start bringing all different political arguments and religious arguments and, this and that and all the rest, people can get worked up, and what happens is their reaction is not sound. And I think if we break it down to the simple equation of let's recognise all together, let's have some common ground here between us all, whether we're Christian, whether we're Muslim, whether we're atheist, whatever background we come from, we all agree that killing innocent people is wrong. We should all come together and be able to recognise it whenever it happens, whoever it's perpetrated by, whether it's a sick, twisted bunch of people who follow a particular cult and claim to be from a particular religion, or whether it's even at a governmental level, and whether it's politicians who are being pushed by lobbyists and big businesses to take this action or to take that action, we need to recognise when somebody kills an innocent life, that's wrong, and we'll all stand against it together, no matter who it comes from and no matter where that innocent life is taken. And as we all know, the day before the Paris attacks, almost 50 people lost their lives in Lebanon.
Yep.
And that was another ISIS attack. Now, that didn't...
It was underreported, wasn't it?
It was underreported. And what else is underreported is that Muslims are attacked and killed by ISIS more than anybody else. There are more mosques being blown up than there are churches by ISIS than anybody else. And so I'm not trying to say that we are the victim, but what I am trying to say is we need to come together. We need to recognise injustice, and we can all recognise it, regardless of which faith we're from and regardless of which country we might live in. It's illegal, it's forbidden to kill an innocent human life, and we all need to have the same policy. What does worry me, and this is in all honesty, is when the reaction is an emotional reaction and one which is rushed into. And when people talk about the response being merciless, we will respond to this mercilessly. That's not a good word in my vocabulary.
Well, neither of it is it a word that's common to any of our religious traditions.
Absolutely not. And I think when we then get into the political sphere and we get into political rhetoric, but my difficulties are how I express solidarity for my Muslim brother in England, and how I express solidarity with my French cousins across the channel there. And I've been reading just last night about, and I take some of the things Adam's saying very seriously there, but there was a long Christian tradition of the just war, and the just war was about there having to be a just cause to that war, and there had to be a just way in carrying out that war. Language like merciless doesn't necessarily or come anywhere close to what a just war would be like. But I do think, and I have to say this, I do think that what happened in Paris can be rightly described as an act of war. And I can understand some of the rhetoric that politicians are using in that regard.
But we need, unlike in previous conflicts in recent years, we need a UN resolution to back this, don't we? We can't. I mean, what's happened in recent years is that in the West, we've gone ahead with wars where we haven't had the agreement with the rest of the world. If we can bring in the Arab nations, if we can bring in the rest of the world and Russia, Putin, we need that level of agreement before we can...
But I think I said in one of my tweets that I said we need analysis. We need to understand why it's happening, and we need action. Government's responsibilities, a state's responsibilities, are to defend its people. And that includes defending all the citizens of this country, and the French government needing to defend all of the citizens of that country as well.
Well, interestingly, over the weekend there was an article by Peter Hitchens, who I don't often agree with, in the Daily Mail. I don't know if anybody saw that article where I posted it on Facebook and various other social media outlets, that he said that what we need not to do is overreact. And we need to step back and we need to think that we're not being very thoughtful in how we're responding. I mean, would you agree with that, Adam? As a kind of nation.
100%. And what I fear is responses which aren't thought out properly will just be increasing the size of the Frankenstein which has been created in the first place. And so you can see many fingers pointing to the refugee crisis because of this. Passports are being found and whatnot, which is questionable in my opinion to even release that information so soon after the attacks in the first place. But that to one side, fingers have started to be pointed at the refugees. But if the response to that is to go in and bomb a city, which you might be bombing specific individuals who were responsible in some way for the attacks in Paris, fair enough. This is a just fight, as it was. And if it meets the standards of international law or it meets the requirements of your faith, then fair enough. But to go, we all know that there are going to be innocent casualties. And the question arises then, what is the difference? What is the difference? And it's a question which is hard for us to ask when we're killing innocent people from our planes and our armies and our bombs. But the question needs to be asked because an innocent soul is an innocent soul. And on the day of, and from our perspective, on the day of resurrection, on the day of judgment, everybody will be judged one by one, and they'll be questioned for every single thing which they've done. This is from a faith perspective. And we're told in the Quran that if you take a life, it's as if you've taken the life of the whole of humanity.
Yep.
It's as if you've killed the whole of humanity. And this is also found in the Jewish traditions, the same. It's actually quoted as a Jewish tradition. In the Quran it says, we decreed for the children of Israel that whoever takes a life, it's as if they've taken the lives of the whole of humanity. And likewise the opposite applies. And whoever saves a life, it's as if they've saved the life of the whole of humanity. So human life here is what is important.
We're talking about the sacredness of human life, aren't we?
I agree with that. But if we went back to what seemed to be a purely European conflict in 1939-45, there were actions taken by a state against other states. And what's the Christian reaction to that when Britain is being bombed by Germany? Is it to debate to the nth degree these these close, personal, true statements about life? Or is it how do you defend the people of Britain? Is it just by simply putting up a wall? Or is there a question that in certain circumstances there is a justness in taking action against the perpetrators of that action? The tragedy of war is that everybody knows innocent lives are lost. I grapple with those questions all of the time. I do know that, or I believe, that to defend our country, and other states will think the same way, then it is not simply about having security here, it's about dealing with the problem. And that's why I said we need analysis and action. We need to understand the problem, and we need to take action in concert, backed by, and Adam has said, backed by international law.
Well, thank you both for coming on. We've run out of time. I know we could continue talking. We could probably talk to the, as they say, to the cows come home. But thank you so much for coming in, and thank you for joining us on Faith Matters for this special episode. See you next time.